Kalo Boulevard bristled with promise and flair in the early hours of the afternoon. It was a popular restaurant street, packed to the alleys with everything from the most delectable, expensive five-star cuisine to the most gritty, charming holes in the wall. The sidewalks teemed with eager, hungry customers, all searching for the winners that would leave them satisfied. There was a sense of merriness and camaraderie apparent in the air as regulars tossed cheery greetings to outdoor waiters, and everyone buzzed with anticipation for their coming meals. Desmond, who had draped himself in more fur than existed on wild animals in a 10-mile radius, stood at one end of the street and watched in disgust as the swarm throbbed with activity. He considered several of the restaurants on this street acceptably nice, but he would have considered them excellent if they didn't allow such a routine debasement of their clientele. Some of the people walking around today looked like they didn't even own any gold. If they did, they certainly didn't know how to use it. Nonetheless, Annalise was gone, and he, as a mortal being, still had to eat food if he didn't want to experience mood swings, pain, and eventual death. He was about to huff in frustration when a billboard caught his attention from across the way. It read, in vibrant purple letters, Vittorio's Emporium, and the path to it was relatively unobstructed by the grimy folk. The decision was simple from there. When Desmond stepped into Vittorio's and shut the door behind him, the noise of the street outside disappeared entirely. It was him, alone, with an empty reception desk, a framed drawing of a cat that looked like it had been done by a 4-year-old. It had actually been done by a 7-year-old, but he was stupid, and a listless line of piano notes breezing softly into the room. Apart from the art, Desmond nodded in quiet approval at the atmosphere before ringing the bell at the desk. He waited about 15 seconds before ringing it again, and then 10 seconds after that, and then 5. Finally, a server came from further inside. "Hello, sir," she said. "Sorry for the wait." Her tone suggested that she was lying. "Will it just be a table for one?" "A private parlor, please," Desmond said, ignoring the clear layer of ire hiding just beneath her job-mandated politeness. "And a tall glass of wine to start me off. Your most expensive stuff." "Our private parlors are reservation only." Desmond, eager for an opportunity to display his wealth, said, "Oh, I'm sure they are. This is a very classy establishment after all, but I'm also sure that for an acceptably high price, there can be an exception." This server in particular was no stranger to making exceptions, but they usually weren't for money. More often it was for small things like bringing out an extra slice of cake on someone's birthday or free appetizers on anniversaries. Even on the rare occasions that she did accept incredibly generous tips, she liked the people she was helping. She didn't particularly like Desmond, and she wasn't in a good enough mood to pretend, so she let her eyes roll at his suggestion. "Did you just roll your eyes at me?" Desmond asked, even though he'd clearly just seen her doing exactly that. "Is this the way you treat your customers?" "I'm sorry," the server began, but that was far too little to stop him at this point. "I'll have you know that I am Desmond Rantraba, and I won't be treated like some second-class citizen. I could buy and sell this restaurant and everything in it 100 times over, and your first reaction is to treat me with disrespect, where I think you've made it very clear exactly what kind of values this place has and what sorts of people ought to eat here. You won't be seeing a dime of my money, that's for sure." Then, before she could even begin a response, he turned on his heel and stormed back out the door, arriving once again on the bustling Kalo Boulevard. It didn't take Desmond long to find another place to eat. For as picky as he might have seemed to be, he was actually very open to eating a wide variety of foods, another contributor to his infallibly good health. This time he'd gone to a fancy Yaladian place called Pavo's Pesto, which had readily given him a private parlor and assigned him 3 servers to keep him happy. It was a frivolous assignment. One person hardly needed more than 1 server, so the other 2 just stood guard at his parlor entrance in case someone wanted to disturb his peace. For his appetizer, he'd ordered a creamy vegetable soup with a round of sturgeon caviar-topped focaccia. Pavo had sent the soup out in the restaurant's oldest, most time-honored ceramic bowl, which had been around for about 300 years and only saw use about once every decade nowadays. But even something as well preserved as this bowl was not immune to the ravages of age. There was an internal break on the very bottom, just barely hidden away from the naked eye. When Desmond's spoon touched it, a fragment detached and started floating around in the soup, waiting to be swallowed and choked on or chewed up with the surrounding vegetables. It was in Desmond's spoon, ready to make a positive change in the world, when he stopped and sniffed at the caviar. "You," he said, snapping his fingers and calling the idle servers into the parlor with him. "Where is this caviar sourced?" "Just off the coast of the Spiral Sea," said the shorter of the 2. "Why?" "Unbelievable," Desmond muttered, pushing the plate of focaccia a little further away from himself. "But not unexpected. The Spiral Sea is home to the most unpleasant fish I've ever had the misfortune of eating. Everyone knows that only fish from the Rhombus Ocean are worth a damn. Switch this out for Rhombus Ocean caviar, if you will." The 2 servers looked at each other, mildly confused, until the taller one left to talk to someone higher on the chain of command. "How's the soup?" the shorter one ventured, against his own better judgment. "It would be greatly improved with the right caviar." Desmond's dour tone made the situation quite clear. There would be no further discussion until his problem was fixed. In his mind, this strategy made him a tough negotiator. By preemptively closing any avenues for dialogue, he shaped meetings such that his terms were the only ones under discussion, and therefore the only real option to move forward with. It was one of the finest strategies any toddler had ever devised. Through this entire silence, the broken ceramic shard sat patiently in Desmond's spoon, waiting for its shining moment. If he'd been a reasonable person, that moment would have come. This was some of the best soup in the country, although Pavo's wasn't so well known that it would have appeared in any lists, and he'd hardly eaten a bite all day. But there was nothing for it. He wasn't reasonable, and no amount of hunger would suddenly change him to be. The shard remained untouched for just as long as the silence. Instead of the taller server, the chef de cuisine, Pavo himself, stepped into the parlor. "What's this I hear about a problem with the caviar?" "It's sourced from the wrong ocean entirely," Desmond said, turning his nose up at the dish, "and it renders your food completely unpalatable. I need a replacement if I am to enjoy my meal here." "I'm terribly sorry," Pavo said, "but there is no other caviar in this building. It's all from the same place, my friend." Desmond almost launched into an angry tirade about the declining quality of food service in Destin, but Pavo caught him before he could build any momentum. "If you're looking for more depth to your seafood, I know of an excellent place a little further down the street. They should have what you're looking for." Desmond hesitated. On the one hand, he thought, this fellow was very clearly a local man. If he'd had a wider-reaching perspective, he would have had caviar from more than one place. In general, Desmond strived to never trust the tastes of local men because he found their opinions to be too grounded in immediate reality. However, he didn't want to spend more time on Kalo Boulevard than necessary. Perhaps, he thought, if this other place had these more exotic sources, Pavo would know. "All right," he said with narrowed eyes. "Where?" "It's called Super Sushi," Pavo said. Desmond stood to leave without another word, but Pavo held up his hands. I know how it sounds," he said, "but it's a good place. Owner's just a little eccentric, that's all." "Is that right?" As far as Desmond was concerned, eccentricity was a very good thing for a chef to have, for much the same reason that spice was a very good thing for a dish to have. The greatest chefs were the ones who could combine strange flavors that nobody normal would think should go together. Only an insane person could decide unprompted that mint flavors belonged anywhere near savory meats, for instance, but this combination had created one of Desmond's favorite delicacies: peppermint pork. Oh, yes, very strange individual. Great food, though. Desmond thanked Pavo for his help, left several pieces of unhelpful and unconstructive criticism about the food, and then left for Super Sushi. The ceramic in his bowl sat alone, quietly disappointed. As it happened, Super Sushi was in a complete state of upheaval. The owner, a flighty older lady named Yoko, had decided that today was the day to try a completely new menu. Her various chefs and servers scrambled from station to station, trying and failing to keep up with her fiendishly complex notes in any timely manner. Yoko herself was hidden somewhere in the back, quietly taking inventory, her favorite thing to do whenever she found herself overwhelmed by the stresses of her work. Nonetheless, Desmond was intrigued enough by the whispers of this head chef to wait patiently to be served. He had even been willing to eat at a public table. This place had no parlors. He sat quietly in the corner, poring over the long, complicated menu until the fugu section caught his eye. Some humans have a perversion surrounding death. They take pleasure in taunting that grim concept, in testing its boundaries to see where exactly lies the uncrossable line. It should come as no surprise that egotistical Desmond did this often, with gusto and zeal, and he hadn't yet been taken. Fugu was a purpose-made way for humans to engage with their perversions, and Desmond made it a point to try it every time it was available. When his server finally arrived, he forcefully jabbed the first option in the menu, which was a sashimi arranged like butterfly wings. "I'll take this," he said, letting the excitement read clearly in his voice. The server grimaced. "Sir," she said, "you know that—" "Of course I know," he said, blowing right past her. "I don't want to be patronized by the woman bringing me my food. Go and place the order." "Our fugu chef is new," she said, valiant in the face of his customary stupidity. "Are you really sure?" "I'm sure," Desmond said, showing an unprecedented snore of patience. "Fugu it is." Their fugu chef was better than new and inexperienced. He was Lazy Eye Larry, who before today had never even seen a completely intact fish. He'd gotten this job through a statistically improbable series of clerical errors, misplaced resumes, and misremembered interviews, and now he was staring straight down the barrel of one of the most poisonous pufferfishes known to man. Someone might have seen what a botched job he did of cutting it open, soaking the poison deep into the meat, making all the pieces the wrong sizes, and somehow getting bits of skin onto the dish. Someone might have seen that, if not for the fact that everyone was scrambling just as hard as he was, thanks to the new menu. The only difference is that most of them were scrambling with a degree more competence than he was. If his final plate was supposed to be a butterfly, then it was a butterfly that had been caught in a nuclear fallout zone. Somehow it had a gaping jaw with jagged teeth and a third wing. By sheer chance, he'd also spilled rice over the plate so that it looked like spindly little legs, bent all at the wrong angles, as though someone had introduced this creature to the broad side of a book. It was beautiful, in much the same way that a bird vomiting into her chicks' mouths is beautiful. The server put on a pair of latex gloves before handling the plate, but even then she regarded it with apprehension. It was only when Larry shot her an intense look, forged in the fires of this strange day, that she found enough courage to bring it out and place it in front of Desmond. Desmond's face went from eager anticipation for his death fish to startled horror when he saw what lay on the plate.
"What is this?"
"Fugu," the server said bravely.
"I was promised a butterfly."
"It's a fugu butterfly." Desmond stared at the plate for a long, long time in perfect quiet. The server watched him, curious. His eyes moved from one end of the plate to the other, over and over and over, as though the image before him needed to be savored. He opened his mouth, and for a moment, for one shining, perfect moment, it seemed like he was going to eat.
"This," he said, "is without a doubt the worst thing I have ever seen. There is a time and a place for eccentricity in cooks. I understand this very well. But when the price for eccentricity is a complete desecration of all aesthetic sense, the word ceases to apply. Insanity, depravity, aberration, none of these words sufficiently describe the injustice that has been done to my eyes on this day. If I were to eat this, I would be casting aside my own dignity and peace in exchange for meaningless calories. Everyone in your kitchen should be sorry, and everyone on this wretched street is worse for having you here." And so it was that Desmond went without food until Annalise returned at 11 p.m. that night, at which point he ordered her to make him a sandwich.